Welcome to Project Next's brand new premiere show, From Prison to Pastor. I am unbelievably thankful and grateful that Rich Gianzero is with us. He is a pastor. He has led the most incredible life, is leading it now, one that started at 16, where he committed a violent crime and was sentenced to a maximum security prison in New York. He served over 14 years in this prison, and now he's a Lutheran pastor dedicated to living a nonviolent life. How did we get to prison? How do we get to today? And the wisdom, the knowledge that Rich has for us, I really think it can help us when we're living in such a divisive time in America in 2025, when we're constantly bombarded with messages that we should hate and fear our neighbors because they might have voted differently than us, or because they might think things that are different from us. So I'm really looking forward to learning this knowledge that Rich has to give us. And we're going to really dive deep into his life story today. And this is a recurring show, so don't worry, we will come back and discuss more details, his life, and we will also center on fascinating topics that we all need to know more about. Rich, thank you so much for joining us, and how are you doing?
Thank you for welcoming me back. It's nice to be here. I'm good. It's cold this morning in this part of the country. So,
Yeah, snow. We're having some snow right now.
yeah.
So this is your second time being
Mhm.
on Project Next. You were on a show with Tim. Tim has like a priest and a doctor show.
Yeah.
And so I listened to that episode and was like, oh, I need to talk to this person. So if you want to hear another version of you telling the story, you can go to that. If you already listened to that episode, don't worry, you will be giving more details, but we will be covering your life in case you didn't catch the first story. So can you just introduce yourself, and then we'll dive deep in the story and see what we can learn from it?
Yeah, sure. Thanks again. So, I'm Pastor Rich Gianzero, and I pastor a small Lutheran church in Madison, Indiana, or Jefferson County near Hanover College. And then in January, I'll continue as pastor in that congregation, but I'll also be serving as the executive director of the Kentucky Council of Churches. So I'll be pretty busy, and it'll be fun to make some time to visit with you and share things about what I'm up to, what I was up to in prison, the transformational parts of life that happened in there, and then what I'm doing here along the way, and trying to be helpful to people.
Yeah, what you do, the way you live your life now, aligns really well with Project Next's mission of uniting, of we have more in common. It's okay if we don't agree on everything, come and join us. And I kind of love the churches thing you're talking about, because it's not one denomination. It's how many denominations is this thing in Kentucky you're going to
Yeah,
start doing?
yeah. The Kentucky Council of Churches is 11 denominations, and so it includes the four Roman Catholic dioceses of the state of Kentucky, the Episcopal Church diocese, the ELCA, the denomination in which I'm ordained in, Presbyterians Cooperative Baptist Fellowship, I should say Presbyterian Church USA to be specific, the United Methodist Church, and the three historic African American Methodist churches. And if anybody's watching and I missed one of them, I haven't started yet, but I'm not intentionally leaving anybody out. So yeah, it's a good
I just think that's really
mission.
beautiful, because we're just constantly bombarded with division all the time. And there's lots of different types of Christianity. So it's a really beautiful thing that you're going to be working on this, uniting different churches coming together and working on a common goal of community. I just really like that. So we'll talk more about that in future
Sure.
episodes. Um, I imagine you didn't foresee yourself in this role when you were a kid, like living this life. And it probably, I would imagine, took the horrific events that happened to you as a young man and a kid to lead you here. And that's what is so fascinating. Most people would think the way you started your life, you would not arrive as a Lutheran pastor. So that's what I want to get the of in this episode. Take us through a little bit of your childhood that led you up to committing this violent crime, if you don't mind.
Sure. There's some people who think I shouldn't be a Lutheran pastor within my own denomination. So,
That's kind of
uh,
funny because isn't the root of Christianity like forgiveness?
well, that's a good question that I don't want to get into right now
Yeah,
because
maybe we can do an
uh,
episode on it, but
I, I,
like,
I remember a social media meme where a guy was saying all this Christian stuff, and then he was being mean to somebody else, and then his child in the cartoon said, "Well, aren't we supposed to love our neighbors?" And the adult said, "Well, we just preach about this stuff. We don't actually do it." So
oh
there is
yeah,
that element, but
yes,
yeah. So
definitely.
I'm glad to kind of share a little bit about how I ended up in prison and committed the crimes that I committed when I was 16. Um, and I appreciate this idea that you've invited me into around um, the idea of unity and those kind of things, which I think a lot about in the context of difference. I think it's important to consider. You and I talked briefly before the show about around what ideal or around whom do we unify, right? So I think that's an important thing to unpack along the way too, because people who are suggesting that other people are not really human or treating them that way, I don't think I cannot be in unity with that.
Right.
I think
When you
that's a
look at
bigger
another
piece.
group and you don't see them as human beings, you've
Right.
lost some of your humanity, your empathy. We have to kind of shine a light on that. Hang on, look at what we're
Yeah.
doing. This is a weapon used to make another group of people not seem human. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so you come at an impasse, and I think maybe there's some analogy that we can do with my story. I think it's good to just mention a couple things that the crimes I committed were about 33 years ago, and I've been home going on 20 years. So I'm not a person that came out of prison 2 weeks ago and decided I was going to walk on water across the Ohio River to meet you in Indiana and
Hmm.
save the world, right?
Right.
So let me say that I was a kid in Denver, Colorado, and was a victim of several instances of childhood sexual abuse and assault by two men and a woman. And
Hmm.
I talk about this and name this as a person, and also in my role as a pastor, a public faith leader, because we're I think socialized in our nation generally not to talk about these things, and for men specifically who are victims of violence and sexual violence, we're really socialized not to talk about these things,
Right.
um, and well, that's just not healthy. We need to talk about them. So I was an angry kid, angry teenager. Um, some of that was because of the abuse that I suffered, and as I look back, feeling like I was robbed
Right.
of childhood,
Right.
robbed of the opportunity to be a be a person.
I think most people in your situation, especially in the time period, is this the early 90s? Is this the 90s?
The late '80s, yeah,
Late 80s?
yeah,
I think most people in your situation would have a real sense of rage inside of that abuse. There wasn't healthy ways you could deal with it or seek treatment. You weren't talking about it. There's probably shame and guilt and all kinds of bad things inside of you. So the rage and the anger makes complete sense on a human level that you were
yeah.
feeling that.
And families don't have. How do my parents, who certainly loved me then and loved me through being in prison, and my sister, affected by this. The tools and opportunities were not available, uh, and I'd argue in a large degree are not available even now. Right?
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
People are often treated as experimental subjects who are victims of violence. And of course, we know statistically that people who end up in prison are and especially those of us who have committed a violent crime have also been victims in some way, right?
Right.
So I left home at in the middle of 10th grade, and I had a car, and I was working as a busboy back in the day, and so I had what I thought was a lot of money, a few $100, and grabbed friends, and we took my car and drove to New York. I was trying to see my best friend in Queens, and my car broke down in New York, and we staged a carjacking. This was back before that term was invented, and I shot two men, and I'm eternally grateful those men haven't died. And you know from our previous conversations that it's always important for me to express some gratitude for the fact that those men did not die, and some humility around the reality that I am at peace in my life. I'm so very grateful to be a father and a husband, to be a pastor, and trying to live a redemptive life. But that never removes the reality, right, of hurting other people. So it's always important for me to express that, just from a sense of responsibility and honesty.
So
Uh,
you're saying, you can kind of forgive yourself in like a Christian type of way in order for you to be at peace inside, but that doesn't let the bad feelings that I did this, I messed up these people's lives, I made a horrible mistake, that doesn't go away. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, yes, in the feeling sense, and I think that's healthy. I
Right.
actually think that's aside from the religious kind of connotation of this, that's some level of human maturity. Maybe it's helpful to say that's a difference between awareness of guilt and shame.
Right.
I'm not ashamed of who I am as a person, but I'm always embarrassed of the crimes that I committed, and the harm that
Right.
and the harm extends, right, to, you imagine my parents and my sister. Why would my brother do this? And
Right.
so for me, it's just about integrity,
Right.
honesty, and some level of humility. So certainly faith, my faith as a Christian person certainly gives me some um, spiritual or moral grounding around the ideas of forgiveness.
Mhm.
But not as concepts or kind of esoteric pie in the sky type of concepts, but really about what I call redemptive living, um, and understanding, at least to some level, the gift of the present.
I don't think it takes very long to speak to you to realize you're sort of an exceptional human, that because of your life, you have more wisdom than the majority of us. And I think a big part of it is what you just said just now. You're willing to say your worst day. I think most of us would be tempted to never talk about it again. Be like, look, I'm
Mhm.
sorry. I don't want to talk about it. It's too painful for me. I caused harm. The willingness that you are to come on a Project Next show for the second time and cover this shows your humbleness, your willingness to show that you are not perfect. And I think as humans and in our culture today, that is kind of rare.
Mm.
I cover a lot of politicians on Project Next, and I'm always saying if they would just admit wrong and then fix the mistake, we're all making mistakes, and
Mm.
and so I just want to point that out. The fact that I'm sure you don't enjoy talking about this part of your life, but you do it over and over and over again, kind of helps shine a light on you are exceptional and we can learn from you. And it's freeing too. It's freeing to admit your worst mistake publicly. It kind of makes you braver than a lot of humans, which is why I like to talk to you. I like to spend time with you because of your of your personality. It gives me peace. So I just appreciate you doing that, and I just want to acknowledge this is a pretty brave thing that you're doing. And it's interesting that people that are in the Christian realm try to stop you and say you shouldn't have this position of power now because of your past actions. That's interesting to me. Okay, so you commit this crime in New York. Are you arrested that night? Take us through what happened. A 10th grader really hits my heart. I just want you to know I have a 10th
Mhm.
grader. He's going to be 16 in a couple months. And
I have one
so,
too,
oh man, I mean,
and an
it probably
11th
gives
grader.
you a lot of empathy on your past self to see how young they are. They're babies still, it's like this
Yeah,
was you were a baby hurting, you know. Um yeah, like I really feel for your parents
yeah.
too.
Well, yeah. I thank you, because it. that, when we I've talked in various places and done some testifying in Colorado State judiciary committees around juvenile justice bills and reform bills and stuff, and talked about the realities, right, of impact on families and stuff. I think that we live in a society that also conditions us to blame.
Hmm.
And maybe this speaks to, I think this is some of where we've gone in previous conversations, right,
Hmm.
about like my kind of sense of person and personal growth and commitments, which I'm always trying to, for me, be a better follower of the teachings of Jesus, frankly, as embodied in the Sermon on the Mount specifically. Um, but we live in a society of blame. We need an object or a group of people, right, to blame, and we don't have very much a sense of shared responsibility,
Hmm.
right? We are interconnected as human beings,
Hmm.
and so we share responsibility. And you've mentioned the word nonviolence, and Dr. King, of course, was our teacher. If the our or the we were willing to hear him, was one of his main teachings was about our interconnectedness. I cannot become who I need to be if you cannot become who you need to be, right? We are interconnected.
So you're
So,
saying like a shared responsibility within our communities to help take care of our children, of our youth, instead of just you messed up, you get locked away for a really long period of time, we're blaming you instead of looking at the whole system. How could we shape these young men and women better so that they do not commit these crimes which put
yeah.
them in?
Well, we need monsters. We need monsters in society.
Mhm.
We need to create the concepts that were created in the late 80s and 90s, particularly as it affects our generation, right?
Mhm.
And all succeeding generations to this time now. We need the super predator. We need the welfare queen. We need these objects that are kind of an idealized form of our enemy. But the
Mhm.
flip side of that is also the presentation of an idealized community. If you've looked at, for example, the Department of Labor's current Facebook postings that present a Mayberry depiction of what real American families, real American workers look like, it is literally a depiction of things that we saw, that this world saw um, in the 1930s in Central Europe. I know that we have algorithm concerns as we're speaking in audio, so I want to be careful with phrases I use so that we don't get edited out, um, despite our First Amendment right. But that's
Right.
another conversation. So let me go back to maybe just me a little bit, because
Sure.
one of the things that I've been taught and that helped me grow was to look in the mirror of self reflection. And when I say I and me, a person can be free to disagree with me or think differently. That's fine, but it's still my thought, my experience, my life.
Mhm.
Um, so I was arrested that same night. We stole the car, and we were caught pretty quickly. And I spent a year in the county jail,
Wow.
and and then I pled guilty. Uh, we were caught, and we pled guilty. I pled guilty, and I was sentenced to 2 weeks after my 17th birthday. I was sentenced to 14 to 42 years in prison.
Oh, wow. I
So
didn't know your sentence was 42 years. I think I'd forgotten that. I cannot imagine you being 17 and comprehending that. The majority of your adult life.
yeah, well, at the same time, right? Now, I've had people ask me about it, and I don't really want to get into it here just for time's sake. I mean, you've been so gracious to say I want you to come back a few times, so I don't want to really get into necessarily the what are the ethics behind sentencing a 16-year-old to 14 to 42 years in prison, right? But that was my sentence, so I'll speak to that experience, right? So at 17, I was in the adult prison system. I typically call these things prison systems. I'm not big on too many euphemisms,
Mhm.
departments of correction or whatever. There's no correcting going on in there, okay? And that just to be very clear, that is not a corrective place. It's not a place of teaching penitence, hence the
Right.
phrase
So you didn't
penitentiary.
go there to learn life lessons.
Nor do they send you there for that.
Right.
You were sent there for punishment, period, and exile. So that's a descriptive reality. That's honest. Um, there may be some people I know or knew in the prison system that are watching this who worked there, and they might disagree with that, but I'm being descriptively honest.
Well, not everybody served in a maximum security prison, served prison time. I would think that you have the right to say what it was like for you.
Absolutely,
I
that's
mean,
that's
I
my
think
experience.
we can sugarcoat it all we want, but you were there, so let's listen to what you're saying. My
So,
heart just goes out to the age. So you're 16, spend a year in jail, you get sentenced to this extremely long prison sentence. You go to this jail. The fear things that are going through your head, and oh, I guess I don't really matter in America. I don't really matter because I made this mistake. I'm gonna be forgotten. Just your sense of self just so gone when it's really strong in America. We're really big about individualized people and how much we each
mm,
matter. I just like it hurts me to think about you realizing nobody like cared about you in that
well,
place, you
well,
know?
I think in the nation, right, that we're this hyper individualism is useful when it's useful,
Mhm.
but then in the sphere of certain political expressions, right, you're supposed to sacrifice your food, your farm, the ability to work for the sake of the state, uh, and that's kind of an authoritarian emphasis, right? That you're a cog in a wheel or
Right.
a piece of tile in a large mosaic of discolored and disenfranchised unity or oneness. Which is why you always, as we talked before about this idea of being neighbors to one another, we need some qualification and clarity around what and with whom do we want to be glued together,
Right.
right? Especially as someone as a father of multi-ethnic or multiracial children.
Right.
If you don't see my children as human, and there are one of your senators in Indiana is literally saying that inter-ethnic marriages should be questioned, right? So I mean,
Our governor said that when he was a senator. He made national attention for saying he wanted to make a biracial marriage go back to the states.
right.
And Tim Peck says he said that because his ultimate goal was to take away marriage equality and make that go back to the states too. So I get what you're saying. It's like, well, we want to unite and we want to join together and work together for the common good, but there are some exceptions. If people fundamentally don't understand that human beings have certain rights, then we have a problem and it's harder to work with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me bring this to, so here I am. So some of the things you said make sense to me, right, about me in a retrospective way, right? But
Right,
certainly at 17 and locked up, and I had no was not thinking in terms of no one thinks I'm a human or whatever. I'm thinking, how am I going to live? How am I going?
right. Okay, so
And
you're just panic
in a
survival mode at this
sense,
point.
and also I did ask myself a question very simple: what am I going to become?
Right.
Because back then, when a person was charged as an adult, as I was, and convicted as an adult, we were sent directly into the state prison system. So I was in prison. I said this on a previous show with people who were literally 3 times my age, literally 17. So um, that doesn't happen anymore. Um,
Okay.
but that's in New York, I should say. It does happen in other states. Um, that also doesn't mean that the change in the law is an act of mercy necessarily. It's typically from the state, by which I mean the government, an issue of liability. If a minor is raped or assaulted by the COs or guards or another prisoner or their staff member, there's a certain liability issue. So I do like to raise a bit of the critical thinking invitation to people when they see things in criminal justice reform or changes. They are not always they are rarely altruistic in motive. That's a fair way to say that. So here I am at that age in prison, and knowing I'm going to be doing a lot of time, and they call that an indeterminate sentence. So I had a range. I could do 14, anywhere between 14 to 42 years. That's a pretty
Wow.
long spectrum. So to I shared with Tim on the other show, some of the first suicide that I experienced when I was 17, of a guy I was talking to. They woke up in the morning. We're all in our cells. Excuse me, just a second, take a drink.
Sure.
And there's no hot water or toilet seats, so you put a towel out on your cell bars, and with a little bucket, and there's a guy that's let out. They call them a porter. Comes around with buckets of hot water to pour into your bucket. And
Wow.
I heard him scream uh, and yelling, and I looked out of the bars, and I'm like, "Yo, what's up?" And the guy had just talked to last night hung himself during the night. Right now, there's supposed to be there'll be people that don't appreciate me saying this, but there's supposed to be security rounds at night. So that was my introduction, in a sense, very very early on
So
coming
you
into
hadn't been
the
there that
prison.
long when that had happened.
No, and I no, and then it was a very violent place that I was at. They called it Gladiator School,
Wow.
and I remember talking to what people called an old timer, guy who'd been in prison for a long time. He said, "Oh, young blood." They called me young blood. You're going to the Gladiator School because that's where you're going to learn how to fight. And so that was normal, pretty normal type stuff. People get cut, officers abusing inmates. When I was 18, a guy I was going to the chapel with was, I think, in retrospect, literally having a mental health breakdown, and he just decided he wasn't going to line up in formation to go to the mess hall to eat lunch. And the officer pulled an emergency pin, grabbed him, threw him on the ground, started kicking him. All the other officers came up, forced us on the walls. They handcuffed him, and they proceeded to beat him with clubs. Um, and that's a very was a very very common thing. And if
I mean, there was no accountability, right? It's not like you
no,
guys could go to somebody, your HR department, and be like, "This is not
no,
acceptable. He was handcuffed. They kept hitting him." You're
no,
just witnessing that
no,
with no
no,
repercussions.
no, and they also have in New York a unionized system for the guards, so there's the ability to do slowdowns and yeah, so that's just the reality.
Mm.
Anybody who's worked in a prison in New York, or who is honest, or anybody who's in prison in New York knows, and I think that the death of Robert Brooks recently at Marcy Correctional Facility, and the suicide of the imam at Marcy Correctional Facility just last week, are small windows into the reality of the abusive natures of prison. So
Yeah.
uh, that may make people uncomfortable.
But
Uh,
we just don't have any accountability. There's just no system set in place. I mean, I imagine there's a few more than there was when you were in there, but clearly it's still happening in many of these places.
Absolutely. So how do I come to a sense of self, right? Because that's one of the things you want us to talk about is how do I come to a sense of self? So it's really common for guys people in general, but I'll use guys and men because I was in a men's prison. I'm a man, so I don't want to be insensitive to anybody, but that's why I'm using that language. Um, Guys often turn to religion, faith, some kind of um, escape, right? Some people will call this like jailhouse conversions, whatever. And so I was, in some sense, in that regard, no different, right?
You needed
And
a higher power to
well, I needed
really
something.
get you through this so you could survive it.
I needed something.
Yeah.
Um, and many people uh, who had become Christian or other religious affiliations, whenever they are released, often throw their Bibles right out, or other holy books right into the garbage cans, and just go right back into life. But that's most often amongst those who are doing shorter time, right?
Okay.
That's another conversation altogether, right? When you're doing 10 years or more, it's a different. is a different kind of experience. So I was no different. And I was literate. Thank God I could read. That was one thing that saved me is I could read. So went to the chapel and I ended up working as a clerk for a chaplain, who, by the way, when I was ordained, was one of the two chaplains and pastors that came and spoke at my ordination service, to become a Lutheran pastor.
That's beautiful. So were you able to go to church every week?
Yeah, we had chapel type services, and I was the clerk there. So, it's a paramilitary kind of hierarchical environment. There's a lot of similarities in terms of how people move and are structured. So I was a clerk typing up stuff for the chaplain, and he gave me an opportunity to work with him, and that was a really big introduction to. You mentioned different kinds of Christianity or Christianities, to a different kind of Christianity within the context of the Black church. And I became, sometimes I'll describe myself as a child of the Black church. And some people wonder at that or don't understand that. But what I'm in part describing is the influence of the Christian message from oppressed peoples and enslaved peoples and peoples who experienced Jim Crow segregation and the civil rights movement, and ongoing and continual to this moment, right? Just racism and white supremacy as literal threats to the entirety of economic being, personhood, so on and so forth. And that message from a Christian context about the central message of Jesus is one of liberation.
Mm-hmm.
So here I am, a guilty criminal seeking to be free somehow. And so freedom songs and the ethnomusicological genre we refer to as Negro spiritual spoke to me because the prison is a modern day plantation. I did not know this, but I was experiencing some sense of hope in my life that perhaps I could be something
Right.
different. The language of the prodigal son parable comes to mind when Jesus said, that son went out in riotous living. The Bible is full of so many strange, odd, and sometimes beautiful expressions, riotous and irresponsible living. And the next phrase is that he came to himself. So I came to myself partly in that, some sense of self in there. And then when another chaplain came, who's still my pastor to this day, I know he doesn't mind me mentioning his name, Jay Lewis, out of Calvary Presbyterian Church in Newburgh, New York. And he came in to start a hospice program. So in the 80s and 90s, many prisoners were dying in prison of anything anyone else dies from, right?
I mean, are you all getting regular checks from the doctor if you get cancer or something? Are you getting treatment for that?
Maybe, maybe not.
It's not
Well,
like you can just say, I don't feel well. Can I see a doctor? And they that day take you to the doctor.
there's a sick call process, so you can go and see a nurse early in the morning if someone's sick. Yes, um, and so in that regard, yeah, you could get checked, and if somebody's really sick, they're required to take you out to the hospital or so on. But I so I mean, I didn't share this with Tim, and I don't mean to be overly graphic, but it's a true story. So I was just at the dentist, right, and they noticed here a couple weeks ago that I still have a wisdom tooth in one of my four wisdom teeth, right? And I had told my dentist here and in Colorado, no, I don't want you to remove that tooth. And the reason why is because when I was 18 in the prison, my wisdom teeth were coming in, and I was in a lot of pain. So I scrambled to see a dentist and was writing letters to see a dentist, and they brought me in. And the dentist came. I saw this dentist. To make a long story short, then he stuck me with the stuff in my gums, and he put a mask over, like one of those clear dental masks over his face, and he literally took a little hammer and a chisel and he chiseled my teeth out. So anytime I get a little shot or something for a dental procedure, I'll try to do it without that anesthetic, because uh, I'll lose consciousness, and it's not it's a body, it's a physical reaction that I have because of that experience of having that dentist hammer my teeth out of my literally out of my jaw.
Did you have, so did you have pain medicine in jail when they were doing that?
Yeah, he stuck me with a local anesthetic, and then they gave me some aspirin.
But it wasn't enough. So it was like extremely painful. Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
well, yes, and not, and yeah, I mean the guy literally standing over me with a little dental
So
chisel.
okay. So that's not,
So
yeah,
I'm,
that does sound
it's
horrific. So
so
yeah,
I have it. So I have like this physical reaction to that kind of thing. So now I have a
that's,
good I have a sense of humor because in New York we would say the same thing that makes you laugh will make you cry.
oh
So
yeah, let's laugh about it.
I always tell the dentist, listen, you got to give me that laughing gas because otherwise I will literally lose consciousness.
This is
And
interesting. We don't know enough about this. I was listening to an interview with Malala. I can't say her last name. I cannot say it right. Yousafzai or something. And she was on my favorite podcast, Armchair Expert, with Dak Shepard. And she was saying she had always said, you know, how she was shot in the head like 3 times by the Taliban for going to
yeah,
school and being an activist as a child. And she always says she couldn't remember the experience. And then she was in college and she smoked pot in college, and all of a sudden she relived for like 3 days. Her brain showed her over and over again the interaction, what happened. So it's just like our bodies, we don't fully understand them.
no, no,
There was
we're
some mental
yeah,
block when she's conscious and aware that was preventing her from understanding and reliving that horror. But
yeah,
so she doesn't want to go like take certain types of medicines and things because it will bring her back. And so yeah, your story reminded me of that. We don't
that's real.
understand the way the human brain works. We're trying to we're trying to protect and save ourselves from our past
Yeah,
traumas, yeah, in ways we don't
it's
get.
trauma. So
Yeah.
let's talk about this connection. Reverend Lewis comes into because people are dying in prison
Okay.
of anything that people would die from in the free world, so to speak. Um, but also exacerbated by some lifestyles, like a lot of guys in prison, right? We had led or were living really hard lifestyles, right?
Hmm.
So a disease can progress quicker or whatever, right? And
Right.
guys
And you're
got
not getting the best care either, as
right,
per your wisdom teeth story.
yeah, that, and we hadn't taken care of ourselves or whatever.
You're
So
probably not
anyway,
getting the best diet.
people are
Yeah.
dying. People are
Okay.
dying, and also it's important to point out, right? The the impetus on the tough on crime stuff back then. So
Oh yeah.
guys were getting sentenced for 1 year to life. Remember, mine was 14 to 42. But could you imagine me sentenced 1 year or 3 years to life in prison?
Or just sentenced life in prison with no parole. There's a whole bunch of people in this
Well,
country that have been sentenced that.
and the point here is that a person, these were typically folks who were not drug dealers, but were their own best customers, right? It was very rare that tough on crime legislation went after actual drug dealers, right?
Right.
Um, uh, so guys would end up spending all this time in prison, dying in prison because the sentences were also longer.
Right.
So they built medical units in the New York State prison system onto some of the maximum security prisons. And the prison I was in had one of those. So Jay Lewis came in to start a hospice program. And of course, I'm a pastor now and I have a master's degree and other stuff. So now I understand the fact that he is and was a clinical supervisor that trains chaplains and pastors. So, but we didn't know that in prison. But he formed a training manual and program for us, for guys who were hand selected to go into the regional medical unit and be the hospice volunteers for men who are dying. And our job was to sit with them once they had terminal prognosis of 6 months or less to live. That's the hospice criteria. And when they were actively dying, we would sit on 24-hour vigils with them. So we
Wow.
would be anywhere between locked into the prison medical room with them, 1-to-1, or if they had a cellmate, we would be in there with them 6 to 16 hours a shift, 3
How
months
old
a
were
night.
you when this started?
I'm going to say 23.
Okay.
when I started doing that. And
How old were you when you started attending church and helping?
I ran there at 17
Okay.
as a, and
That's good.
not
It's
not just for not listen not just for the best of all motives either. It was
right.
just a quieter place, frankly, and um, I certainly liked the music that people could sing, and I still sing a lot of those songs sometimes before I preach on a Sunday
Oh, I
morning.
bet it has. I bet it conjures up a lot of feelings.
Well, it's feelings of I'll say groundedness and
Yeah.
gratitude.
Yeah.
Groundedness and gratitude. So
Hearing this story, I'm just very thankful that you were offered to get to go to a church, that you were offered to get to have music there, that there was this good person mentoring you through this horrific time in your life. And he just seems like such a hero, caring for the people that the majority of us in America have forgotten. Lock up, throw away that key. We're not thinking about you. So
yeah,
I'm thankful that you had him there.
and still have him.
Yes, how wonderful. I mean, what would have happened to you if you weren't given that opportunity?
Well, so I mean, this will go back to what I was saying, kind of about shared responsibility and our interconnectedness, right? Like, so I mean, you've said many kind words about me, and I thank you. I thank you very kindly for those kind words. And I didn't just come to myself, to use that language again from the prodigal son, on my own, right? I had
Right. So
people that,
other people were stepping in, helping shape you to be a
yeah,
better human.
and,
Yeah.
and, and it was Jay Lewis in particular, but I'll never ever undervalue the fact that my parents and my sister didn't write me off.
So they still loved you
Yeah.
while you were
Now,
going through
while
this.
how about this? They loved me when I was unlovable.
Hmm.
How about that? Um, but Jay Lewis in particular, because of the intensity of being in the hospice program, and I was his clerk, what mentored me. But let me tell you this very honest story. I was still a what we would call there a roughneck. Sometimes going into religious spaces uh, makes a person even more judgmental toward others. So I,
Right.
I, I had a lot of self righteousness, and particularly there's a uh, now listen. Let me be very very clear what I'm about to say. I do not want sex offenders living next door to me or my children. Okay, I do. There's a different kind of thing going on when a person is doing that stuff. Okay, that's beyond simple criminality in a certain way. Um, but at the same time, how can I sit? We would sit in judgment as prisoners over sex offenders and rapists, certainly bottom of the rung, and um, but yet here I am, a guy who almost killed two innocent men, right? So there is a so I what so here's where I want to go with this. So when I met Jay Lewis as a 21, 22-year old before the hospice program started, he was coming into the prison as the new chaplain, and me and another guy was a clerk, and we greeted him. So we were praying for our chaplain to come, which is true. And then after about 6 months or so, I'm watching him, and I'm like, I did not like this guy. I did not like him. I worked for him, and what I know I didn't like about him is that he was able to get into our business,
Hmm.
get into our faces metaphorically, right? And challenge us. And so one day he asked me, this is a true story. One day we're sitting in his office, I was doing some work and stuff, and he says something, and here I am locked up with a green shirt and a department identification number on. And he says, well, Richie, they call me Richie, what's your problem with me? This is one-to-one conversation. And I looked at him directly in the eyes and I said, I don't like you. So there's one thing about me is I've typically been an honest person, for good or bad, right? Better or worse. And he looked at me, and we still talk. We still joke about this as recently as this week. Uh, he said, "Well, I'm going to love you anyway." And when the hospice program started, right? This is yeah, I said this on Tim's show before, and I want to say this again. At that time, we were not given any sentence reductions, any privileges, anything. for being in the hospice program. We simply went over there, and most of us were doing long sentences. A number of us were what we call lifers, guys with life sentences. Our commitment was that no one should die alone. No one should die alone, period. So we went through a training, we went over there. The training was amazing because it was J. Lewis specifically bringing together other people and teaching us how to be, we wouldn't have known this then, but teaching us how we might become human in a dehumanizing place where we were treated as animals
Right.
in cages. So we would go over there initially and get security escorted into the medical unit, and the officers there, we call them in New York COs, correctional officers. They didn't like this. Some of them literally would say to us, and I won't repeat all the words they use, but they say, "Well, my mother died by herself, so why the
Oh,
f, f does this? Do you inmates get to take care of this person?" Or
I hear that all the time is reason not to help people. I hear it all
right,
the time in our government. Why would I help? Why would we give them this? I didn't get that. I did it
right.
myself. It
Which
it's
which is never true, by the way. Because even if you got up on this morning and drove on a road, somebody paved that road.
yeah.
Somebody's
Yeah.
taxes paid for that road. But
Doesn't it, it comes from a base of, in my opinion, we're not good at accepting responsibility for our own faults. And when we don't take responsibility for our own faults, we don't like to have empathy or forgiveness for other people. So we cling on to it. And then it becomes the self-righteous thing.
well,
Um,
somebody said this. I won't give the author and title, but said that if we were really looking for evil or sin, um, in our when we are judging other people, what we would actually do is look within ourselves, because that's the place we surely find it.
yeah.
And that kind of honesty and in self-examination and critical thinking is rare, I think, in our society. Certainly rare in the loudest of public voices that we hear.
Yes.
But then if I look at myself with some sense of sobriety or honesty, right? Then how I begin to look outward changes. And
Right.
so we we were going over, okay, our small group of 8 prisoners were going over into the medical unit, and the COs would often throw us up on the wall aggressively. They would pat frisk us, which makes sense because you can get some stuff over there in the medical areas, so that made sense. But they would run their hands up our legs and hit us in the scrotum. Um, and so we came back. Now you're talking guys like,
So this is happening to you every time you're just trying to be with someone that's dying,
yeah, I don't want to say every time, but
but
quite
frequently.
often,
Okay.
frequently by a regular
So
group.
you're getting negative actions happening to
I,
you for
I wouldn't
doing
call
this
that.
hard thing.
It's a little bit beyond negative
Yeah,
when
you're
they're
getting
hitting
like
you in the
abuse,
in the
basically abuse.
testicles,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
and thrown against the wall. So we now you're talking about 8 guys that we're not we are not pushovers. Okay, I'm trying not to use prison language, um, and we're like, yeah, this ain't what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
So we talked to our chaplain, to Jay Lewis, and he sat there for a minute, looked at us, because this is a man that I love him dearly. Okay, and earned respect from people, and became a pastor even to a lot of prison guards, not just prisoners. A man of integrity, a beautiful human being, and he finally looked at all of us in his office, and he said, "Next time they do that, I just want you to say thank you, Jesus." And so in my mind, let me just tell you, my Christian prisoner mind, I was like, "F that." But we said, you know what? Yes, that's what we're gonna do. And that's what we did. And in some odd way, we converted those officers.
Wow.
They stopped doing that. And the next time it happened to me, I said that out loud, because I figured I knew how to tell somebody "F you" loud. I knew how to act like a tough guy, even if I was afraid. But I said out loud when he hit me in the testicles, that officer on the wall while I was going to hold the hand of another dying man. I said out loud, "Thank you, Jesus." And that officer just stopped. And what ended up happening over time, and pretty quickly, is that those officers would see us sitting there on a vigil overnight with these dying men, feeding them if they could eat, or giving them water, or putting Vaseline on their lips,
Hmm.
or reading a letter from their family, or reading a poem to them, or reading something from a book or the Bible, or writing a letter for them. And those officers, sometimes they would stand with the flashlight in the middle of the night and just look at us. And I'm like, dude, what, you guys are weird. Like, leave us alone, you know? Like, that's what I'm thinking. But they didn't know how to respond to this.
That's what I was thinking. They're probably in their job, they really try to not see you as human beings. They just try to see you as terrible criminals that don't deserve anything. So
Well,
you're making them see that you're human just by saying, we want to be with other prisoners as they're dying. And that makes them face their thinking is not accurate. You're human beings in here and
yeah.
deserve
So
to be treated better. So it seems
yeah.
like it's like
Well,
making them confront some stuff there.
Yes, that's true. It also, this is a maximum security prison, so most of us in there have been in there for a few years.
Right.
So people are known in prison. Everyone knows who's having sex with other people on the down low or up front. Everyone knows which officers bringing the drugs in to give
Wow.
to the prisoners to sell. Everybody knows, and most people don't say anything. So our group of people, we were committed to this principle that no one should die alone, period. So long story short, in a certain sense, we converted them to our cause, to the point where sometimes the officers, right, which is security in the prison hierarchy, would come over and tell the chaplain or the counselors, "Hey, so and so needs one of them hospice aides." He needs one of them or they say one of them hospice dudes because they're not doing well. And the medical people in the medical unit would say, well, they don't qualify to have a hospice person because don't have a terminal prognosis of 6 months or less to live. And the officers have the keys, the badge, the baton, the rifles in the towers, and they're like, no, that guy, something's wrong with him. He needs one of those hospice aides. And so they became, strangely, some of these officers over there became strange co-conspirators to care for the terminally ill.
That's what a beautiful story. At the beginning of it, we're not thinking too kindly on these security guys. And some of these same people were physically doing harm to you.
Absolutely.
And through your acts of love, you help change them. And then that helps the people in the prison. And it really helps show what we want to do here is community. One small act of love instead of judgment and hate has an impact, and then they spread it. And when we're so filled with despair and we feel kind of hopeless right now with the division, with the government shut down, with people starving, one small act does a lot. Feed the hungry neighbors if you can. Do one small thing instead of the mean, judgmental, not looking at them as human thing. This is just a really incredible story. I'm so thankful that you shared that with us.
Well, I appreciate it. What was happening in reality is that now, if you read anything of Martin Luther King, when he was in jail, he would talk to the guards all the time, and he'd say, y'all ought to be marching with us. He understood this. I believe this is why they killed him. He understood the interconnectedness of people and the forces that create division and segregation, whether by law or otherwise. We're separating people because we do have common interests as human beings. And so what we were doing, in a sense, right, in a real way, without just in a very real way, is we were tapping into the humanity of the officers themselves, who come largely from rural communities, poor communities, white poor communities, right? And they themselves Uh, I don't know that people grow up as kids and say, "Oh, I want to be a prison guard."
Right.
You know, so there's something about humanity touching humanity and our interconnectedness. The other flip side of that, in reality, though, is that some officers were confronted with their own humanity and inhumanity, and dug in, okay, and became even more aggressive and against what we were doing.
Because they don't want to face that truth. So then they
Well,
have to go the other way. It's like you're
so
confronted with it, so you pick your path.
so
Either,
let's
yeah,
talk about this confrontation. But again, let me talk about me, right? Because I can talk about me with an authority no one else can. And I know we're wrapping up here in a minute. So I was working with a guy about a year into doing hospice who was who had I'm thinking about the algorithm now, sexually assaulted his own daughter.
ugh,
Okay, and this person, no, none of us we're like we didn't say heavens no, but I'll keep it pastoral here on the for
you
for
didn't want to show this person compassion.
it's not that we didn't want to be near him.
Okay.
Nothing. This guy, and yet we were challenged to think about our commitment. No one should die alone. So I ended up working with this guy for 3 months, who eventually
Wow.
died. There's a lot that happened during that 3 months. He started calling me by the name of his son-in-law, who was married to the daughter that he had committed this essay on. Okay, because the daughter was his legal decision maker. And so he was talking to me toward the end of life by the name of his son in law, trying to work out what Jay Lewis would tell us is unfinished business. And that was one of the most profound uh, problems for me in my humanity was looking at this guy disgustingly because he was a disgusting person. And I don't say that to be mean, but I had to be confronted with the reality that here I am sitting literally next to him in judgment. Well, I'm a person who almost killed these two men when I was 16. So what am I learning about me as I sit in judgment of another? Um, it's not easy answers to this. I think we're conditioned in society to have sequential answers or an algebraic conclusion. You follow an
Right.
order of operations and you're going
Yeah.
to achieve this outcome. But human life is not really so simple, especially as a person who has, and I preach about this sometimes, as a person who needs forgiveness and needs to forgive, someone who needs love, but also needs to love, right? Um, that brings us, I guess, in a sense, brought me to a place of becoming human again, even to myself. And so, from the Christian message, right, in a sense, for me, this idea of incarnation, that God's personality, or a reflection of God's very personality, comes in the person of Jesus. You'll forgive me. We're getting close to Advent here in the Christian calendar. So those of us who live in this world, I think, are aware. We get Christmas is coming, but this Christmas idea of God coming to us to show us what God is like in the person of Jesus became very important to me um, because I never saw or read of Jesus avoiding confrontation or people being guilty, someone like me, but also saying, you don't have to be like this. You can become something else.
Right.
Um,
You're not
so,
stuck in your past mistakes. You can grow, move from
but
that.
I will also say, as I know our time's coming up, that I do not embrace, or nor am I in favor of this hyperized concept of an immediacy of being born again. All of a sudden, you're born again, and everything just fade away because there's no
Yes.
accountability in that,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
and
there's a
that's
lot of
used.
problems with some of
What
this
what
thinking.
one of the problem is that it's using this faith language of my faith as a tool for power and negotiation instead of for restoration of community and relationship. That's a key difference. It's not restorative. It excuses, and we could maybe I can't tell you how many. Christian missionaries I was in prison with who committed sex crimes. Um, and then when they were going to get caught, decided to go off somewhere else and be a missionary all of a sudden, or pastors or religious leaders. So there's an element of abuse that I'm very well tuned to in my role.
I just did a story with an investigative reporter on Friday about this. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
that's
We'll go ahead and end it for this time, and you let me know when we can do this again. This was a pretty fascinating conversation. What I just want to emphasize, we have to forgive ourselves, and we also have to kind of sit in our mistakes a little bit, even though it's painful and discomforting. We got to sit in that discomfort so that we can grow, so that we can acknowledge other people are also messing up and are doing their best and are trying. And it's hard. And you were forced to. You were forced to do that.
well.
You
I
know,
want to say
like you didn't have
I
to, but you
was
chose to. I guess you chose
yes.
to
I,
because you had good influences and you
yeah.
picked some good decisions after this terrible one that made you, put you in prison. And I guess I'm just encouraging all of us to look at life a little bit more in that lens, in the lens of the way you did in prison, and the security guards that chose to see more humanity in the prisoners they were watching. I, I just think we should all be trying to go towards that way instead of the other way of judgment, of not viewing people as humans, of viewing them as other, that we should shame them and not help them and not work with them, because that's not getting us anywhere other than more division. And we want the opposite. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think the idea of confronting right systems and evil practices, right, or things, also allows us to get to find out who are people that are honestly wanting to engage in common good too. And it's a quicker pathway also to find out those who will never choose to do that.
right.
And simply, I'll borrow an analogy from Jesus: dust the dust off your feet and move on to where collaborative partners and folks are, because not everyone, just like not all the prison guards, really want to be unified around an
Yeah.
idea of liberty and justice for all. It's just something we say because that's our civic religion. So I do draw a strong distinction around issues of safety and stuff, especially when we're not in a homogenous community. So
Yeah.
my four children have four different skin tones and reflect the various race. I prefer to use the word ethnicities that our family comes from. In fact, you might not even see that some of my children are siblings, right? People who think that they are inherently wrong, evil, violent, or unintelligent are not people that I can ever be unified with.
Right.
I also think too, if we're honest, that we cannot find a time in the history of our nation when we were unified. Our unity is usually always based upon putting our feet on the necks of another group of people for the purpose of saying we're in unity, which is really about just not having tension and conflict in the public life. It's never really been about everyone
Right.
being treated the same in terms of fair opportunity equality. So that's
So
where
you're kind of saying have unity, have compassion, but also call out and shine a light on when people are not loving everyone, when they're not doing the appropriate things
well,
we need for community.
well, seek unity amongst those who are seeking it. But
Yes.
unity from certain political perspectives is not about unity for and with and among people as neighbors. It's about unity through obedience.
Right.
And I say this with a collar on as a pastor. Obedience is a very scary concept that's been leveraged by what I'll say is an unholy marriage between politics and religion, or
Right.
government religion.
Mm-hmm.
So if your unity is based upon being forced to obey a narrative which is untrue, that's not unity, that's conformity.
Right.
And so you've heard me talk personally about my life and being an honest, right? If our society and nation can muster the courage to come out of the prodigal nature of our structures and start telling the truth, we might
Right.
actually And that's where we're seeing tension, a lot of tension, and I think a highlighter on
Right.
the disunifying history of our nation.
Right.
All men created equal did not mean everyone.
Right.
We the people did not mean what it meant, those who qualify as people.
And maybe we should learn about our history,
Well, if we
United
do,
States history, instead of trying to cover it up and act like we've never done anything wrong. It's okay
well,
to still love our country and acknowledge our flaws.
so
And
that's the invitation.
right,
If we had unity around shared facts and
right,
truth,
right.
then we could wrestle together across our differences and different experiences. And instead of being suspicious toward one another in our experiences or not trusting the experiences of other people,
It's just
right?
so messy, and people want a cut and dry, black and white view of everything. And that's just not the way the world is, and life is scary. So I get why we fall into these traps. And it's just so complex. Like you say, I can't welcome everybody in because not everybody has the best intentions. But at the same hand, we need to reflect on the common good of the community. And we should be getting people that have that vision in charge. That's what I'm trying to help.
Yeah, well,
We need better people in charge of
yeah.
systems that have the common goal of benefiting the community.
So let's say, so Dr. King talked about being at the table together, the table of brotherhood, which is his language. We would say perhaps siblinghood or community, right, today, right? And it's fine. We all have limited language in our times and places. But let's take the analogy of a table, which is the center of many Christian places of worship too. So let's say we're sitting at the table together, right? And listen, I don't like mushrooms, right? So if I ever get dinner with or something with you and your husband, I just let you know I don't like eating mushrooms. But some people have alert allergies, right? And so if we're at the table of fellowship in a societal perspective, right, and people are allergic to truth, or they're made themselves allergic to the presence of Black people or indigenous American peoples because they're allergic to that because of the way they think about them, then we can't actually really eat together because the table is not the place of fellowship. You know what I mean?
At
That
the same hand, though, there are there's a black comedian, I can't think of his name right now, that went and visited people that have a KKK chapter, and they have a
Yeah, I've
radio
seen that.
station, and and even though it's Kamal, I think is his name,
Yeah.
Kamal something, yeah, he's amazing, and so I hear what you're saying, but Kamal's brave enough to actually go and talk as a black man and maybe help lessen their fear and their hate. So it's like, yeah, yeah, they don't get to come to the same table,
No,
but
I'm
I
not
still
saying
think
that.
we should
I'm
go
not saying that.
talk to them and push on them and
I'm not
try to
saying that.
help.
I'm not saying that they can't that people can't come to the table. I'm saying when they get there, which means the invitation should always be open.
Okay.
But understand that when we're coming to this table, we are coming around shared knowledge, shared truth, shared facts, and we are not living in it. Our society has not been an honest society. So we want to come with honesty and truth, right? This is why we're seeing so many attacks on educational systems and stuff, because when people begin to learn about our shared history as people in this nation, right? Then my history and the multi ethnic nature of all four of my children, there's a shared history here that is different in some sense from each one, but it is shared because we're interconnected. We are living here.
Right.
So division is often the tool employed by those screaming unity, the loudness. What they really mean is shut up and do what I say.
Right. So we need to examine which version of unity are you talking about? Yeah. Okay. We'll go ahead and
All
end
right,
it for
let me
today,
talk
but
about
this
it.
has been fantastic. I could talk to you all day. Thank you so much. Let me know when you can do another show. If you could please share the show if you're watching, share it with a friend that might gain some wisdom from this, might enjoy the conversation. We are on Substack. You can go to Project Next Indiana and enter your email, and you can get these shows sent to you as emails, and you can read the summary and see if they sound interesting. So you could do that. Also, we're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you would please subscribe on YouTube. We have 725 subscribers and we need 1,000. So anybody want to help with that, we very much appreciate it. We are growing and we are changing and kind of morphing into what our mission is at Project Next. We're coming up on a year, and pretty soon it will have been around for a year. We're still new. And I just really thank you to all of you that listen and share and talk about these shows, and please comment. I want to know what you think about it. And Rich, can you invite everybody to your church? Where is it? What
Oh, sure.
time? Where
Yeah.
can people
So
go if you want to meet them in person and listen to a sermon?
yeah, so people are welcome to come to church and visit us 10 a.m. on Sundays at Resurrection Lutheran Church on the hilltop in Madison, Resurrection Lutheran Church. And when I talked about the table in our practice, we have communion on Sunday mornings, and that table is open. Everyone is invited to receive communion. There's no litmus test. You don't have to meet with me. We do believe that uh, the story of Jesus on the cross with arms wide open, that those arms remain open. We welcome seekers and doubters, the overly confident, divorced, the transgender people, immigrants, refugees, any kind of humanity that says, I know I need some connection. We welcome you as you are. I'm Lutheran enough for everybody, and you don't have to be a Lutheran.
That's nice. So
So we're
yeah, you
welcoming.
could go see him in person and listen to him sermon. I'm very thankful for your work that you do in your community. I'm thankful that you met Tim and he convinced you to come
Yes,
on.
Tim.
So yeah, Tim, like, cause you're in his district, he's running for Congress. So that's really neat. I'm running for state house and mine is not in
Mm.
yours. It's a much smaller little
Well,
area.
I guess also we didn't mention, I actually live just outside of Louisville, so
Oh, that's right.
I
You live
live
in
in
Louisville.
Kentucky, so
Yeah. So you live
yeah.
closer than your church to me. That's interesting. Yeah, we'll have to try to meet up in person sometime. That would be nice.
All
Um,
right.
yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that wisdom. I feel better. I feel like I just had like a really intense therapy session or something. So yeah. So thanks everybody. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'm gonna have a show with Christopher Machen, my favorite Republican, on Thursday, where we're gonna talk about the divisiveness and what we agree on and what we realize is propaganda on both sides. I'll see if I can get Tim Peck to do a show this week. He's just coming off a very busy week of working night shift at ER. And he worked night shift, Rich, and did a debate and then worked night shift again. I was like, Tim, you know you are human. But he's coming off of that. He just finished his last shift for a few weeks. So I imagine hopefully he is sleeping right now, but I'll see if I can get him on a show this week. And thank you, Deborah, for sharing the show, and just have a wonderful day, you guys. Thank you, Rich, and good luck with all the amazing stuff you're doing.
Thanks. See you later.
Bye, everybody.